Growing up, I was a huge Resident Evil fan. And with my friend group, either you were a Resident Evil fan or a Silent Hill fan. There wasn't a whole lot of crossover. I didn't even get to play these games until I was in my 30s, and they absolutely blew my mind. So today, that's what we're talking about. Welcome to Silent Hill. This was the game that actually pushed me into looking deeper into horror games. There's so much backstory and lore to uncover that I kind of went down a rabbit hole and I never got out of. You really can't talk about Silent Hill unless you're going to start talking about the dev team, Team Silent. Now you've heard of the island of Misfit toys. This was the island of Misfit devs. The team was comprised of people who really had kind of fallen out of the industry in their respective jobs. Either they had underperformed or their games had done poorly. This was where Konami threw all the misfits. If it wasn't for the success of Silent Hill, they probably wouldn't have kept their jobs at all. When it comes to Silent Hill 1, there are several key members of the team that are really important to bring up. Toyoma was the director, Ito background and monster designer, Yamaoka, sound director. Sato, CGI director. They were tasked to make this game in 1996, so it's really not that big of a stretch to feel like this was Konami's response to the popularity of Resident Evil. From my understanding, this was really not an easy development cycle. Yamaoka has even gone on to say that Konami really lost faith in not only the team, but the game itself.
この時はね、中でも喧嘩しましたね。喧嘩したのと、あと今思い出したんですけど、これ初めてアトランタの E3 でトレーラーを出したのが初めてなんですね。で、その前までは会社内でも絶対この作品を売れないって言われてて、ちくしょうとかって思いながら佐藤くんとか伊藤くんとかみんなですごい悔しい思いしながら頑張って絶対アトランタでみんなの花を沸かしてやるっていう風にみんなでこう思ってた記憶ありますね。アトランタ行った記憶。
Unlike most circumstances, this actually turned out as a blessing because with Konami taking a step back, they were actually able to make the game that they wanted to make. Kind of unheard of in game development. The CGI director Sato even went on to say that Konami eventually tried putting people in charge of him, which means he would have lost all credit. So instead of taking on extra people, he did everything by himself late at night. In my opinion, this is one of the most important cutscenes, not just in horror gaming history, but one of the most beautiful cutscenes ever made. Silent Hill, which is a psychological horror game, was released in 1999 and has left one hell of a legacy in its wake. You play the role of Harry Mason, a father who's searching for his lost daughter after a car wreck when he enters the town of Silent Hill. Unlike Resident Evil, Raccoon City is not this great character that you have to deal with, where in this game the town itself is probably the most formidable thing you're going to come against, which kind of says a lot. As we move around the town, we often have to deal with the fog world and the dark world. Both of these were used as great ways to hide the inexperience of the team and the technical limitations they were up against. Honestly, the town itself could be a whole video in itself as far as dealing with its history. The aspect that's really put forth in this game is the cult that actually starts the entire process of what we know as Silent Hill as a franchise. Much like the game that probably inspired it, we do get tank controls, which is similar to Resident Evil. For those of you who aren't familiar with what tank controls are, if you press up on the D-pad, you go forward no matter what direction you're actually looking in. I've never had a problem with these controls. In fact, I actually kind of prefer them. but I don't blame other people if they end up hating it. One thing that makes Silent Hill very different from Resident Evil is the use of pre-rendered backgrounds, and by that I mean Silent Hill doesn't use them at all. They're all made in-engine. Probably the most talked about aspect of Silent Hill is that the monsters actually mean something. They're not just some random characters used in order to make something scary. They have a purpose and a deeper meaning that actually ties into the storyline. The Air Screamer, a pterodon based on the description of the book The Lost World. The split head is based off a fairy tale combined with the sounds from a boiler in the school. The Grey Children can be seen as malicious classmates. This is a major hallmark of the series, and it's actually something that ties the gameplay to the story. The game was very well received, and it actually has an 86% rating on Metacritic, which when you think about it when it comes to horror games is actually really solid. The game sold over 2 million copies and even landed itself on the greatest hits lineup for the Sony PlayStation. IGN placed it number 14 in the top 100 PlayStation 1 games. The game was later made into a movie, and for once I can say that a game adaptation was pretty good. I actually like it an awful lot.
Sharon! Sharon! Somebody! Help!
I was asked to be on a podcast to review it. I will be sure to put the links down below. Henry, the host, was super gracious to ask me to be part of it. He runs the It Came From a Monster Movie podcast. I've actually been asked to be on for the sequel, which we'll get to someday, I'm sure. I was also on a previous episode for Nightbreed and one of the Friday the 13th, so I'll make sure to put the links down below.
The fire started 30 years ago.
This game impacted a lot of people, and you can see that by all the different development teams that have games that have this similar feel to them. I can't tell you the number of times I've played a game and thought this was a much better spiritual successor to Silent Hill than some of the actual sequels. I even said this about Rule of Rose, and I recently played a game called The Medium, and I got that exact same vibe. The franchise that spawned from this game is very much loved, and Silent Hill 2 is considered to be one of the greatest games ever made. Is this game forgotten? Absolutely not, but it is drastically overshadowed by its sequels, especially Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. Unfortunately, the other thing I hear is the absolute hatred for every Silent Hill game that Team Silent didn't make. But that's a story for another time. A CIB, or complete in-box copy of the game, is getting more and more expensive, so if you enjoy this game, I recommend picking it up while you can. Unfortunately, I only have a loose copy, which is just the standalone disc, and it's going to be harder to either marry those or just buy a whole new set. Thank you for watching the video and enjoying our first steps into the world of Silent Hill. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Until next time, long days, pleasant nights, and may you have twice the number.